Hi everyone, this is Nidhi from Canopas and you are listening to the Canopas podcast, the show that wants to make developers' life a little bit easier by providing directive guidance. Welcome to episode 7. In this episode, we will discuss what is REST and what is GraphQL, when one should use REST versus when one should go with GraphQL, how they differ, how to develop both of them, and which languages supports them. Today we have Jimmy as our guest who has experience in mobile applications and web development on multiple platforms. As we are going to discuss on REST versus GraphQL, let's first discuss what is web service. So web services is basically, we can say, it is any software or any application or even cloud technology that uses standardized web protocols that are HTTP or HTTPS to connect or interoperate or exchange data messages across the internet. In short, web services are the medium that transport data from one point to another point. We can relate web service to the school bus that picks students up from their home and drop them out at their school. So yeah, Jimmy, what are your insights on web service?
Uh, Thanks for having me on this podcast, Nidhi. So I agree with you on web service. It is basically a way to transfer data from one point to another. Like if you are using a browser or you are browsing a website, right? Then those data is not present on that browser or user's machine. It's basically there on server. So we'll have to find a way to get those data from server to user's computer or user's mobile. Like web services just allow us to do that. That's it, basic uses, but it's not limited to that. It can get very complex, like it can allow us to change the data on the server, like we send someone a message, right? In that case, that message basically goes to a server with web services, and then it goes to that another person with web services, and that also in between changes the state of the server. So I think web service is the way of transportation for the internet.
That's very simple explanation. As we know, most of the time we are using most popular two methods as web services, that is GraphQL and another one is REST. So what are your thoughts on GraphQL and REST?
So I think GraphQL is a query language for APIs that basically allows client to get some data or maybe allows them to put some data on servers, and it gives powers to client, like they can ask exactly what they want, and server will give just them, and nothing more, nothing less. So for GraphQL, the heart is schema, where server defines schema. Like suppose you have a user application, right? In this case, user can have a first name, last name, email address, etc. So the schema is basically defined on the server, and client also can have like a copy of that schema, and from that client can ask like, this is what I want. When I want user, I want only first name and last name and nothing more. And server will provide just that. So schema is at the heart of GraphQL, and in contrast, REST works with, like, it's pretty popular standard, but the base is endpoint. Like there are endpoints for get users, and there are endpoints for maybe adding users and updating user and stuff like that. And those endpoints are like very well defined. Like you need to give exactly these arguments while invoking that endpoint, and it will give you exactly the same data every time. Like you cannot say that I don't want address from that user field. It will just basically give you the same thing whenever you invoke that endpoint. Like client does not have choice what they want. They will always get all the data that is provided. So yeah, that is REST.
Okay, so basically REST is like a combo pack. Whether you want or not, you need to accept it full-fledged.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you get what server wants you to give. You don't have any choice.
Okay. In case of GraphQL, is there anything like endpoint we need to call uh, as we are calling in case of REST?
So in place of endpoints in GraphQL, there are queries and endpoints. So in both, you can provide some data, and it will basically give you the data back that you want. Like in query, you can specify, like suppose there is a get user query in which you get list of the user with username and the first name and last name. So you can specify it in your schema, and you will get exactly that from GraphQL server.
Can we analyze that GraphQL is implemented at Frontend or Backend?
I think it's both. It's not just front end or back end. Basically, back end defines the schema, and clients make use of those schema to interact with the server.
Basically, GraphQL can be used to specify information exchange strategy between client and server with the context that what data and operations are available, what exact data we will need from server, and after receiving those response from server, how client should format request, and on server side, how server should execute queries, and what client will receive in response, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's basically the schema, that is what I said earlier, at the heart of the GraphQL, that is shared between client and server, and it specifies all the things like what is data, what exactly are our models, and what are the operations that are supported on the GraphQL server. So it will also guide client about how to format request and what to expect in response.
Alright, as now we are familiar with GraphQL and REST, let's move to the point that when one should choose GraphQL over REST and vice versa. Is there any strategy for choosing between them?
I think one should use GraphQL when clients want to have more choice about what exactly they want. Like with GraphQL, you can specify, like, out of this 10 field, I want only these 3 field. Nothing more, nothing less. And that will also use less data, because those less data needs to be transferred from server to client, right? So the operation will be fast. And another thing is that GraphQL also allows you to, like, specify nested query. So if the schema is complex, then in that case, if GraphQL can specify, like, I want this nested field with this query, then that will basically save an API call or two while showing the UI on client side, right? And that can save time. So in place where there are complex schemas and in place where data usage is important, I would recommend a GraphQL. And in contrast, REST is a pretty standard API. So if you are sure about client requirement, like this is exactly what clients want every time they hit this endpoint, then I think in that case they should go with REST, as REST is, like, widely popular and also compatible with lots of platform. It will also, like, give clients more choices about how they want to use it. So if something is simple and stable, in that case one should use REST, and if something is, like, ever evolving and complex, one should go with GraphQL.
Okay, however, REST is more popular nowadays. It tries to give you full package, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Like, imagine you are staying at a hotel, and there are two types of hotel. One is where there are, like, predefined 5 packages, and you choose one of them and you get all the things that is listed in that, and the price will be that accordingly. So you don't have much choice, except, like, it is possible that the price is high and you will not need all the things listed in the package, but you still have to pay for it, right? And the GraphQL is the type of hotel where there are, like, so many defined small packages that you can combine any of them according to your needs. So you will need to pay exactly what you are using, nothing more.
Yeah, that makes sense. Does GraphQL replace REST?
No, I don't think it will ever replace REST, but it can be a good alternative when needed. As I said, for simple and consistent request or architecture, REST is really good. Okay, so if something is complex and I would say ever evolving, as mentioned earlier, or maybe something that wants to give client more choice, then the GraphQL would be the way to go. And as I said earlier, it's not a replacement, it's a complement.
Alright, how can one start development with GraphQL and REST?
Uh, I think the strategy is pretty similar. In most of the languages, they have libraries for implementation of GraphQL and also REST. Like there are some framework that you can use, and it will like provide you a way to like define your schema. And once you define them, then from that schema, like mutability, queries, and models will be auto generated for GraphQL, and you'll need to fill in like how you want to serve your queries and stuff like that. And in terms of REST, it's more simple because there are just endpoints, and from that endpoint you can just provide the data whichever way you want. So yeah, I think start using GraphQL and REST is very simple. Just search about like what are the popular frameworks available for the given language or platform, or one how can start using GraphQL or REST. Like for client, I would say like there's an Apollo framework that one can use on both Android and iOS. And with Golang, there's a library GQL Gin that you can use for developing servers with GraphQL.
Thanks for the explanation, Jimmy. Are there any concerns related to performance of using both?
I don't think so. Most of the time, metrics like scalability, performance, and security concerns will depend on your actual implementation, and we cannot say like GraphQL is fast or GraphQL is secure or REST is scalable. It really depends on your implementation. Both provides like unlimited capability to do whatever you want, but it will depend on your implementation. So I think both are fine according to performance, and you should go with the one that satisfy your use case.
Those were really helpful insights on GraphQL and REST. Now our audience will have a better idea about when to choose GraphQL or when to choose REST. Thanks for listening to the Canopas podcast. Make sure to check the show notes to discover our informative materials related to this podcast. If you have any questions or are interested in further discussions, please feel free to reach out at our Twitter handle @Canopas.